I just feel so grateful the way things worked out because I got the cream of the crop.
We do have a love for our Heavenly Father and our Savior Jesus Christ.
My mom and dad were George and Thelma, and she was Thelma Brim, and she taught school, and she came to Swan Lake, and that's where she met my dad, and I was born in my grandma and grandpa's home, and my mom named me Barbara because she had read a book about the Barberry Bush, it was called, and there was a main character in that was called Barbara, so she decided if I was a girl and she was going to name me Barbara, so that's how I came to have my name. I was the second child and the first girl in a family of 8 children. I always felt secure with my parents. Even if they had an argument or debate over something, I knew they loved each other because they showed it, and so I always felt secure in our home. And Mother was such a caring mother, and she encouraged us to do well in school.
I would have been about 4 years old, and Dad rented a place in Declo that really left quite an impression upon me. An incident that happened there, he had gone to cut the hay, or he had cut the hay, and we'd gone for a load of it to bring home to feed the cows. The place that we were living was not on the place that he was farming, and but he took me with him to load the hay, and as we came out of the lane down to where the hay was, he turned the opposite way of what I thought he should to get back home. And I asked him, well, where are we going? And he said, well, we're going down here to a man by the name of Chadwick. He's got some scales that I can weigh this wagon load of hay. And he said, part of it's the landlord's, so we need to know how much hay I'm using. And so we went down there, and Mr. Chadwick, they weighed the hay, and his brother happened to be there. And they evidently were quite impressed with the fact that Dad was bringing the hay down there and to weigh and to account for it.
We had a teacher, Miss Weeks. She wasn't my teacher, but she was Harry and Milton's, and she was just the greatest teacher and became very good friends with my parents. And they were putting on the Christmas show, and she had come over to help my mother with the costumes, and they were teddy bear costumes. And anyway, and I remember Milton and Harry they had their winter underwear on, and they had what was called a barn door. And they were running around like a horse or something, and they had their barn door down. And I remember that, how Mother was so upset because they were doing that. And then another funny thing was when they had the program, they were to dance, come out and dance standing up. And my cousin Dale had the costume on backwards, so the tail was in front. And everybody just was laughing, and I thought, that is so sad that they're laughing about that. And my aunt was just mortified. And one particular Christmas play that we had, Roy Merrill, who was probably about 6 years older than we were, maybe not quite. But anyway, he was supposed to be the magic person. That we're poor, we're very poor, and we had in the play, and we had on ragged dresses. And then he was to come over and pull that ragged dress off, and then we'd have these nice dresses, and that was the magic of this play, and this man was playing magic or doing magic, making our dresses nice and pretty. Well, he pulled off my nice dress and the ragged one, and I was there in my slip.
Dad would get me up in the morning to go out and help him milk the cows. And I learned how to milk cows just before I was 6 years old. And from then until the time I was 14, I milked cows by hand morning and night. And the time I was about 10 years old, I guess, Dad gave me a calf. And and when it was real small, it was in the wintertime, it was cold, and another animal stepped on its tail, and it took, it came off. So the calf was bobtailed, but I was really proud to own that calf and take care of it, and as time went by, it got to be where it was going to have a calf of its own, and one of the neighbors happened to be over there, and he was looking at my animal, and I of course was happy to announce that was my cow, and he says, well, hey, he says, you better sell that thing to me. He says, a bobtailed cow, he says, she'll give sour milk. And I kind of looked at him funny, and I said, well, I'm not going to sell that cow.
There was one time when, in the summer, when Mother and Dad were invited to go up to Yellowstone with some friends of theirs and from Swan Lake, we were to stay home, and the kids, and we decided that we would go on a picnic. So we killed a rooster. We caught the rooster and killed it, and chopped its head off and cut it up and fried it. And we had our picnic, and it was really a beautiful area where we were. And so then when we came home, we had a flour sack that had part of the things in. And Harry and Paul and I were on one horse, and Milton and Ludine and Phil were on another horse. And they were on the horse that was called Flax, and it was a very spooky horse. And the one that we were riding, Harry and Paul and I, was named Dick, and it could have been a racehorse, because anytime they're riding and if a horse got ahead of him, he would zoom out and like he was racing. Well, Ludine had this gallon jar or gallon bucket, but it got back on her arm and she couldn't get the bail down off to get a hold of it to stop it from rattling, and it spooked Flax, and so she started to run. And then Flax thought it was a race, Dick thought it was a race, so we were just really going down that road. And Paul, we'd go down on one side, and he'd say, we're going off, and then we'd get ourselves and we'd go down on the other side. And he'd say, we're going off. Well, and we were going off. We went off and landed, and I got scraped on my back, and Harry had a big gouge in the road that he had made with his elbow. We're all laid out on the ground. I looked around, and Milton had jumped up and was running back to get the sack and the things that had fallen off. And I asked him, I said, well, how come you didn't help us? How come you just went running back after that? And he says, I was afraid that you were dead, and I thought if I'd go back there, I'd get that, and then when I come back that you'd all be okay.
I had a couple of kids that lived across the road. One of them was a year younger, and the other one was a year older. And he was kind of a bully, and I was scared of him. And he was always going to beat me up. And once or twice he did get me, and so it made me all the more frightened of him. So I got to be. When school's out, man, I'd take off. I'd get out ahead of the rest of them and get home. And I remember one time wasn't while school was going, I don't think, or it may have been. We were all on the way home, and this kid was in the group there, and my dad happened to come along, and he knew my predicament, but he thought I ought to stand up to the guy, and so he grabbed us both and said, "Okay, now let's let's get this thing taken care of." Well, the guy just knocked me silly. I mean, he just wasn't even any contest, and I still remember Dad saying, "Okay, Floyd, you whipped him. Now leave him alone."
And I remember how excited I was when I heard that Mom was going to have another baby, and we were hoping it would be a girl. And then when we heard that we had a baby sister, Lois and I went in on my mom and dad's bed and jumped up and down, which was a no-no. You weren't to jump on the beds, but we were so excited that we had a little sister, and we were just jumping up down on the bed.
In those years, which really proved to be a blessing to the family, because even though I was during the Depression and things were really extremely difficult, but we were poor and didn't know it, but we always had a garden, and Mother would, Dad would help her with the garden, and they would can the vegetables and whatnot and get fruit in the fall.
And I remember very vividly the day that I was baptized, because as we were getting ready to go, somebody slammed my fingers in the car door. And that hurt so bad. And my mom said, "Well, when you get in the water," says, "it'll feel better when you get in the water and is baptized. That'll feel better." Well, I just couldn't wait for that to happen, to get in the water, and it did. And that was a testimony to me of the faith of a little child, because I had so much faith in what my mother had said, and she had to have faith to say that to me, and so that was very vivid in my mind of my baptism.
I remember my baptism. We, on a Sunday morning, they I don't recall. I don't think we had any white clothes. We just put on some overalls and a shirt, and there was 3 or 4 of us, and they took us. The church happened to be close to the First Lift Canal. It was out on 550 east of Burley, and they took us up the canal about a quarter of a mile to where there was a place we could get down in and out fairly easy, and we. And the 4 of us were baptized one at a time, of course, and I was baptized by Barbara's sister-in-law, Hazel. Her brother was named Gerald Tolman, and he was the one that baptized me.
I graduated from high school. My girlfriend and I decided that we would go down to Salt Lake and work. And I had never been to Salt Lake. I was 18 years old and I'd never been to Salt Lake. And I rode in on the bus, and I remember when I came in, it was just so overwhelming. The buildings, the big buildings, which doesn't even compare to what they are now. But it was just, and the traffic and everything. And so then we found us a boarding house place with a room, and they gave us our breakfast and our lunch and dinner. And it wasn't long that I was very homesick. I was just homesick. It was so different. And we had trekked in our high heels. We had heels, wore hats and a suit, and we walked up and down. We went up to the state capitol and walked down those streets and with high heels. And I think what good shape we must have been in to do that. But anyway, we got 2 jobs, and it didn't matter which one took the one. The one was at the First Security Bank, and the other was up at the state capitol. We both kind of wanted the First Security Bank. But anyway, we went out to to see her sister, and we told her that we had a job, and we started to cry, and she said, well, what's the matter? Oh, we don't know which one to take, you know. And so we drew straws down there to see which one we took, and I got the state capitol, which was a wonderful experience because it was a beautiful building to work in, and I worked in the state tax commission, it was called, and I typed up license plates, their license plate number and their name and their address, and so that was what they run off and gave to the police to, you know, to track down the license. I worked in the school cafeteria, and that's where Hal worked, was in the cafeteria, and that's where we met. And he'd always come in, he'd bring the clean dishes in for the salads, and he would talk to Neva. And I thought that he liked Neva, but come to find out later that he was asking about me and talking about me, and wanted to go out with me. But he didn't ask me, and for quite a while, and that was when I was going with Ken quite steady. But in April, in the spring, he asked me for a date. And then we started to go quite a bit. We saw each other at the cafeteria, and we loved to go dancing, and that's what we did. Every Friday night at BYU they had a dance, and that's where we went. And then when we left to go home for the summer, we corresponded. So then when we come back to school, Harry is graduated, and he comes back with me. And we're standing in line registering, and Hal sees us, and he thought that he was my boyfriend. So, but he bolts right over there, and talks to us and finds out that he is my brother. And then I found Harry a place to live. And then Hal and I started to date. We had gone together quite a bit. And then I thought, he was talking about a mission. So I thought that he ought to go on a mission, so we shouldn't keep going together. And I thought I ought to get on with my life. So one night I told him that. I told him I thought that, you know, we should quit going together. Well, he seemed to take that okay. And then he said the next morning he was just sick. He just felt sick about it. And so we went to talk it over with Merlin and Neva, and then I went down to talk to them, and I told them, and they said, well, why did you do that? I says, we like Hal, and if you could work things out. And so that was on a Saturday. Then Sunday, we went to church at the Joseph Smith building, and then they had a fireside at night, and Hal was with Harry, and he came up and started to talk. And I was so happy. I was just so thrilled that he was there. And so he said, can I walk you home? And of course I said yes, and we were together after that. But I just feel so grateful the way things worked out, because I got the cream of the crop.
July 16th in 1948. I guess I didn't know exactly how to dress to go to the temple, and I put on some casual clothes, and my mom wisely said, better put on a suit, or at least some tie and a coat and slacks, and so I did, and so we went over the temple, and that was before the Logan Temple was remodeled. It was the old wonderful Logan Temple, and we went through a session and were married, and remember the feeling of
I think real joy at the fact that I had found someone who was everything that I had hoped for, and it was a very wonderful day.
And it was really a special day. And I remember one part in the temple that every time I get to that part, I remember how I felt when I first went through there. It was just a calming, wonderful feeling. And as we walked down the steps to leave, I just had this wonderful, warm feeling. Well, we were very excited when we found out we were going to have a baby, and in those days you didn't know what the baby was going to be. And I was kind of wishing for a girl, and you were wishing for a boy. Is that right?
Well, it really didn't matter. I remember really not knowing what to expect, and so it was all for going in and getting the job done, and went on and on and on. And as she mentioned, Tuesday night was really, she was really in pain, and eventually was kind of out of her head, saying funny things, but just really in a terrible amount of pain. And that was when I can't handle this, and so I went outside and walked up and down the sidewalk for 15, 20 minutes, and then came back in. But it was really it was so hard to see her suffer, and so we were very glad when you finally got with us the next day about the afternoon. She was adorable, and I was so happy that I had this little girl, and I was excited that my mom was going to come out and to help me with my new little baby. And she had the cutest round face. I asked him, I said, "Isn't she cute? What does she look like?" He said, "A little red mouse." Well, that was descriptive of when you were first born. Of course, our first experience, and
I thought I was the only one that had done that. I wanted to get up on top of that little cottage hospital and cry to everybody, "I am a mom. I'm a mother."
and you were cute when Brenda was born, and
anyway, you came out we had an attached garage, and my mom was there with you, and you came to the door to greet me, and you said, "What you been doing?" Here I'd been gone away from her, and you wondered what I'd been doing, trying to get our little baby sister. We were going down to Swan Lake to the 17th of March reunion, because they always had one in Swan Lake. And anyway, we had to stop for gas, and Dad could have gotten gas ahead of time, but for some reason he didn't do it. And so we were already late, and I wanted to get there, for the beginning. And I said, "You should have got gas, before, so we'd have to stop and do that." And you put your arm around him and said, "Quit sassing mine daddy." And so I don't know where you came up with sassing, but anyway, quit sassing mine daddy. When Brenda was to be born, I got toxemia again. And so he told me to go to the hospital, and that was on a Wednesday evening. And your dad had a softball game.
and he wanted to play that before he took me into the hospital. So you can see how his children and grandchildren are such sports fanatics. And finally, on Friday afternoon, she was born. And I'd gone through a lot of hard labor. And it was quiet after she was born. And then I looked up and I saw him handing her to somebody else. I said, "Baby all right?" "Yes, baby's all right." But then I heard this machine. So then she didn't breathe. She didn't breathe at first. And so that then she soon started to cry. It was exciting to have her and take her home. And she was a really sweet, happy baby. One time they were playing and Brenda picks up her little playphone and she said, "Hello, Dr. Covenants? My baby's sick." In the front of our house, so we lived on 27th Street, there was an irrigation ditch. And one Sunday we were getting ready to go, and for some reason, I don't know if it was snowy or what it was, but anyway, we got in that ditch.
Well, we backed
Backed
the car out. I can't remember.
Anyway, it went in the ditch.
The wheel went off in the ditch.
We couldn't get out. She said, "Oh, what are we going to do? How are we going to get grudgeries?" Which she meant groceries. One time, she was probably 15 or 16 years old. Catherine was out of college. We were taking her to Pocatello because she's going to work for Uncle Paul, and he had some kind of a business there. So we took her up there so that she could go down to Salt Lake with them. And that day, Brenda taught piano lessons, and she was going to have her little piano recital that night. And we had a lunchbox social at the church, and there was a potato salad that needed to be made, and she wanted cookies for the recital that evening, and Dad was going to take Catherine up there, and Brenda says, "Why don't you go?" And Dad wanted me to, and so I said, "Oh, I can't. I've got to make that potato salad." And I said, "You're having your recital tonight." And she said, "No," she said, "I can do it. Now you go, Mom." So I did. And when I got home, she had all the chairs out for her piano recital, and the house was all neat and tidy, and she'd made the potato salad, she'd made the cookies, and when I got down in the basement, sat down in one of the chairs, I looked at the piano, and where it comes out at the bottom, it's a little ledge, and I thought, "Oh, she didn't dust that," and I was stewing about that. Thank goodness I didn't say, "Why didn't you dust that?" Got down to the church for the box lunch social. The Relief Society, the Young Women's leader, Darlene Whitesides, said, "Oh, I appreciated your daughter so much." She said, "None of the others I could get to help. And Brenda Orton was so sick and she needed some help." And she says, "Brenda had all of her service hours," and that was when you counted service in hours. She says, even though she had all her service hours, I called her and she said, "Oh, yes, I'll do that." So she goes over to Brenda Orton's. She takes the little baby, and she comes home, and she makes a casserole and a Jell-O, took back to Sister Orton, and had the baby. She gets the chairs, she makes the cookies, and all the other things. And then I think of what she's done, and I was wondering why that wasn't dusted, because she didn't tell me any of that. But that was the heart. I mean, she just, has this thing about wanting to help people, and she's very sincere about it. Then when I was expecting Kevin, and he cried before he was born, and the doctor was worried about the lack of oxygen, that he might have some brain damage. But there's just once in a while that you might think maybe he was having a little problem there. So, sorry, Kevin. You're wonderful. But he was this big baby and so cute, and Tell them what you said when you call my folks.
Yeah, I was pretty proud. But, we had a boy, and so when I called her folks, so to tell them, I told them, I said, the king's been born.
Kevin and Stephen were out playing one time, and they had guns, pretend stick guns. Stephen said, let's shoot those cows, because a neighbor had some cows. And Kevin said, oh, you don't shoot cows, all the milk will run out.
We were downstairs. I thought
Yeah, it was
outside,
hot, and I was doing beans, and I was, taking the ends off, and I looked over at him, and he was on a bed, because we had been remodeling your room, and we had a bed out in the big room, and he was just sitting up in that, and he had this bean, and he was pretending he was smoking it, and I looked up at him, and he says, don't worry, Mom, it's just a bean. When I found out about Stephen, I was pretty sure I was going to have Stephen. Didn't know it was a boy or a girl. Hal was up in Boise to a school for just about a week, I guess, and all of you kids got sick. But you finally got over it. But I was still sick, and I was in the bathroom by the toilet throwing up when Grandma came in. She came there and to the door, and she said, well, you're having this a long time. And I says, well, I don't think it's the flu. I think that I'm pregnant. And she said, do you think that's wise? He was so cute. He was just like, when I took him in the doctor on 10-day, you'd always go in the doctor 10 days and he'd look at the baby. And he said, oh, he is such a little cutie. And he said, I've got to go get my wife. And his wife is substituting. And she went out and came in and said, and she says, look at this little dumpling. And she said, oh, he is. Isn't he beautiful, baby? He was 3 when he got in my purse and got some aspirins. And I had quite a few in a bottle. We'd come back from Swan Lake for Thanksgiving, and they were in the living room, and I'd given them something to eat, and then they'd gone in there, and he'd gotten in my purse and got the aspirin bottle and taken whatever was in there. And there were quite a few. And Kevin said, Stephen has been eating these pills that you had in your purse. And he had said to Stephen, he says, I asked him, I says, are you eating sassy pills? Vitamin C, I'd give him vitamin C. And I don't know why they called them sassy pills, probably because they were kind of sour. He says, you're eating sassy pills? So then he came and told me that he had eaten whatever was in there. Called the doctor, and he said, bring him in. And so we weren't just in a real hurry grabbing him. And then he called up, the doctor did, and said,
Get him in here.
why aren't you here? We said, well, we're on our way. So then the doctor wouldn't let me be in the room because he pumped his stomach. And they wrap him up tight so their arms are down. Would be a terrifying thing.
What was it he called it?
Playing a mummy. He says,
Playing
we're going to
mummy.
play a mummy.
Yeah,
And so they wrapped him up.
wrapped him up in that sheet.
And then they did, I don't know what it did, but when I went in there, after they finished, his face was red and just perspiration coming down off his little face. And Dr. Anna say, now you won't take any more pills. Says, you won't take anything unless your mom gives them to you. He said, I won't, Dr. Annison. Called him Annison.
Dr. Annison. Yeah.
And the doctor said what would have happened, he would either have died, or if he had lived, he'd had brain damage with taking those aspirins. Just always felt just so grateful that the way things happened, one of those mercies, those tender mercies that we receive. And he wanted a Japanese Bible for Christmas.
Oh, that's right, yeah. His little boy.
And so we didn't know. We said, well, but we got him a Bible, but it wasn't a Japanese Bible. And that was when they had the Bibles for the primary kids. The church bought them Bibles. And remember, we used to get them out of the library. Each one had a Bible. And so we found out later when he got grown up that it was a white one. And I don't know why he thought a white one would
It was
be
a
a
Japanese
Japanese.
Bible.
You know. Catherine, who was in high school, who was taking driver's ed. And one time when we went to pick Catherine up, she got in the car and she said, "Oh, I killed the engine. I just kept killing the engine." So then we drive uptown and we get up about where the corner on Main, and there's this man that was going across. It was absolutely just looked terrible. He had this torn hat and his clothes were ragged and he looked like he was drunk. And Stephen said, "Was that the engine?" So here was this little 3-year-old boy when she said she'd killed the engine, thinking it was a person, and thought, that looks like he's been killed. Is that the engine? Diane went 2 weeks over, and every time that the kids would come home, they'd come in and they'd say, "Oh, you're still here." And I kind of started to get a complex. So when we brought her home, they were all just so thrilled to have a little sister, and she was fun because she had older sisters, Catherine and Brenda, who adored her, and she had a lot of hair. In fact, when she was 6 months old, her hair was down to her shoulders and back, and her hair was kind of curly in back. And it looked like a style that was called the shag, that they would have it curled up and back, and then they'd have some that was straight down and go under. And her hair was just, that's the way it went. And so anyway, they thought that I had cut her hair so that she would be in style.
One thing I remember, Diane had she had a lot of fun in high school. She had a lot of friends, but the day that she'd been a song leader or whatever it was, and anyway, she didn't get elected the next year. Kevin was home from his mission, and I had him shingling the apartment. We had to reshingle that roof, and so he was needed a job, so we put him to work on doing that. And when Diane got home from school, that's the first place she went. Went down there where Kevin was working, and he climbed the ladder and got up on the roof there, and was crying to.
Just sobbing, and Kevin and I was up on the roof, and she was crying, and
I wonder they didn't both fall off.
But he didn't. I don't think boys feel the same about things as girls. Although he was sorry, but he also chuckled about it, that they're up on this roof and she was crying her heart out. And Diane did a funny thing that she had a wonderful dad that was so good to take it like he did. But we were in our business. In his business, he had Curtis to go in with him to help him with our alarm business. He was really a wonderful help, and he used to stop by a lot, and they'd consult together. Well, he would usually fill his car up with gas at Adams Petroleum, and then he'd come. Well, you know how you get gas on you sometimes? Well, he would smell very strong of gas. And the time when he was there, and they were in our den, the office, and Diane said, "Why don't you tell him to take a bath before he comes?" And she didn't know he was in there. And Dad says, "Well, tell Stephen to take a shower." And he says, "It's not Curtis, or it's not Stephen, it's Curtis." And so Dad opens the door enough for her to see him, because he didn't know what more she was going to say. And then she just dies, and she goes in and she takes the phone out of the hall and strings it in her bedroom, and she called Lucy. She said, I'm just going to be killed. She said, so she told him what he did and what she did. And so then after he's gone and everything, Hal comes out of there and starts to laugh, starts to giggle. And anyway, so she thought she was saved. But we made her call him up and apologize. But that was a very hard thing to do. And she said he didn't say anything back. But she tried to explain that it was, that says, I can't, I don't like the smell of gas, and that was the reason. I'm sorry. And we have to say that we kind of picked out her husband. Went along with it. She was friends with Chris through high school, and it wasn't the kind of a relationship that he would be there at our house or they'd talk on the phone a long time. They didn't, and that was just, we liked that, but we liked him. And and what was funny, Diane was going with somebody and looked like she was getting kind of serious, and we weren't that thrilled. And so our dad said, you just wait. You wait till Chris comes home. You just wait till Chris comes home. So anyway, she did, and they got married, and and in fact, we love all of the ones that we married. We just appreciated Terry so much, and he has just been so good, and they got some of the smartest kids, and Brenda's husband, we love him, and they also have some very smart kids, and that goes for Kevin and Robin. Robin, we've just loved her, and Melody Ann. They've all been just super, and we love them all so much. And we love all of our grandchildren's partners that they picked. They did a good job.
They've done a good job.
And we have the cutest great-grandchildren. And that's no lie. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, I'll vouch for that. Your mom is number one good mom. She loved you all. She taught you a whole lot more than I really had the opportunity to, because I was gone so much. But we have always appreciated and felt good the fact that you've grown up in the church and are part of the church and have raised your families accordingly, and all of our grandsons and so forth, and I think they probably all the boys will fulfill missions, and Stacy was filled a mission, and so it we felt really good in that line. We want our posterity to know that we've had a good marriage. We love each other.
You need to keep your marriage fun and tell each other you love each other. And lately, when I'll say I love you, honey, I love you. And he says, well, what have I done? Or what have you done?
And while I haven't been the most agreeable one all the time, we have had a wonderful, special marriage. And another thing that we want posterity to know is excuse me, is we do have a love for our Heavenly Father and our Savior Jesus Christ, and we have been very grateful to have the church to help us raise our children, and that's been a wonderful aid, and it's gratifying to us as parents and grandparents to see that excuse me, to see that being carried out in our posterity. And we have a strong testimony. I know your mom does, and I do. And we're grateful for that, and grateful that our posterity is carrying that on, and we truly do find joy in our posterity, and we're truly grateful to each one of you for teaching your children and carrying that forth from generation to generation, and we're grateful and gratified for that, and hope that it will continue long after we're gone.